All right. Well, I love Holy Week. Uh, went to the Holy Thursday um, service at the monastery where the abbot washes the whole community's feet, and then it's just the whole Holy Thursday thing is a revolution. We're not going into that. Maybe a little bit later. There's this the whole Jesus revolution of Holy Thursday, turning the empire upside down in the middle of the empire. But and then we'll saw the Good Friday service at the Basilica here in town. Pam was singing, and so went to those two things. But today it's with this community, and the interesting thing, and it'll give you the what our focus is going to be today. Just what I think needs to be done is, especially in and actually both things, but in especially the Holy Good Friday service, it was all men up there. It was all men up there. And when you think about Holy Week, if you know this tradition, no women in it. Where'd they go? And so I'm gonna do a thing today on Mary Magdalene and the resurrection. I'm going to give her some time here. I'm going to put her, even though it's Easter, but I want to give the woman her due, and also suggest that we explore this a little bit more. This the role of the women, and where did they go? Why did they have no place in this? And what's the cost of that? So, my mind goes back to 2018 when I had my first and only date with a nun. Uh, I heard that there was a movie, Mary Magdalene, which I didn't know anything about. But one of my friends said, "Hey, there's at the Village 8. There's this movie about Mary Magdalene," and he sort of knew about my interest. And Pam couldn't go; she was tied up because of preparing, be in the choir. So I called up Sister Elaine and I said, "Hey, you want to go out on a date?" And this 85-year-old nun, who was a good friend of mine, passed away during COVID. And but I said, "You want to go on a date?" And she says, "Well, where are we going?" And I said, "Well, we're going to see a movie on Mary Magdalene." And she said, "Oh, goody." She said, "Definitely." So we hatched the plan. I picked her up. We out at her mother house. We drove down to this theater, and it's a cheap theater, so the tickets didn't cost much. We went in. Rick Panther met us there. He may be on the thing today. I don't know. I can't see everybody here. But so Rick Panther met us there, one of my friends who shows up here with the community, part of this community. And we went in, and there was, I think by the time the thing started, there was 12 people, maybe 10 or 12 people in the whole place, all spread out. And the sound was awful. I think we missed 30% of the dialogue, and there's no subtitles. And a lot of it was very sotto voce, with Mary Magdalene and Jesus sort of talking in very low voice. So we missed 30 or 40% of the dialogue. And but it didn't matter. We came out something. It was a kind of transformation. I felt really transformed by the film, and Elaine was all charged up. So the whole ride home, she was just going at it. She was just going at it. I could still remember this hour ride back to the monastery, and we just were just so taken by it. We missed probably 40% of it, but it didn't matter. There was a power in the film, Mary Magdalene, and if nothing else, especially you women, but you men here, it's the women are most of the community here, and the brave men who show up, they're yearning for something else too, is my theory. And the loss of the feminine was a big cost to pay. Of course, Mary Magdalene got convoluted with every other woman in there, other than the mother of Jesus, Mary. And there's a lot of Marys, because that was the most popular name. There's Mary of Cleopas, there's Mary, the mother of Jesus, there's Mary Magdalene at the foot, And then a little teenager showed up. John supposedly showed up, but there weren't many people there, but mostly the women. All the men ran away. We don't make a big deal about that, but the men ran away and the women were the ones who were there. The movie really brings it out. So I really recommend it. You can see it on Netflix at any time. Take 2 hours and see that movie. And if it doesn't affect you, well, that's okay too. But it really affected me quite a bit. So I want to give you, I've seen this movie. I saw it again shortly after that. I bought the DVD so we could have in the DVD format, you could put on the titles, and so we could actually see what they're saying sometimes. And that was a revelation. Elaine came over to see that with my Thursday night group years ago. And then I watched it every Holy Week after that. So I've seen it 7 times now. It bears re-seeing. It's amazing. And so what came out this watching, Mary Wright's here, her trusty companion Harley is here with her. He may be barking at some time, so barking at the choir probably here. And but I want to what it took this 7th viewing took me over. It was very strong, and so I spent most of a Good Friday. We watched it on Holy Thursday. Or did we watch it? Yeah, I think we did. But anyway, most of Good Friday I spent trying to put down in words what the Gospel of Mary Magdalene was. I've read the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. It exists. That's further study for anybody who's interested in it. A very fragmentary, short, but powerful. You see actually sort of the end of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene in the end of the film. It's a unique film. It's seen Jesus seen through the eyes of a woman who understood him, who got him. We've been talking a lot about how you see is what you see, and whatever operating system you could be working out of your childhood operating system, the world looks sort of scary because we were scared as kids. Who couldn't be? Then if you've upgraded to include a strategic, rational operating system, the world still looks scary because it doesn't make sense, really. It doesn't make sense. And then this third operating system where the teachings are coming up from Jesus, the heart operating system, which sees a different vision of the world, a vision of connectedness. You had most of his disciples looking with another operating system. They couldn't really see the teachings, which explains sort of the agony of 2,000 years in Christianity, trying to read a non-dual teaching with a dualistic mind. And that sort of explains a lot of the disconnects, but there's still power there. Well, I think Mary had that. She had that ability to hear the teachings and see things Jesus didn't see. So anyway, it's really struck me. And so I was basically trying to recover what I thought was the gospel of hers, that it just was from the movie. And so I'm going to read this poem for you. I spent about, Pam thought I had passed out or something. Where was I? Because I was in there working on this poem. So I'm going to give you the poem and then just break it open a little bit the way we do. And then it's really sort of like a trailer for the movie. It's sort of like a teaser. And I hope, if nothing else, that you'll spend 2 hours watching this movie. You won't watch it just once. All right, here's what I call Magdalene's Gospel. And the text of this will be in tomorrow's Monday, so you can actually get the text. And I have a little subtitle under Magdalene's Gospel, nine bows, as the Buddhists say, to both the writer of the script, a British woman, and also to the director, because the movie is a miracle. Well, anyway, here's what it's almost like I know the dialogue after seeing it so many times. So here's what came out on the page for you. Magdalene's gospel. The kingdom of God is like a seed, a single grain of mustard seed, which a woman took and sowed in her garden, and it grew, and it grew. And the birds of the air made nests in its branches. The whole time we've been looking for a change in the world, but it's not what we thought. The kingdom is here, it's now. It's not something we can see with our eyes. It's here within us. All we have to do is to let go of our anguish and resentment, for the world will only change as we change. The kingdom cannot be built through conflict, not by opposition, not by destruction. It grows within us with every act of love and care and with our forgiveness. For the world will only change as we change. We have the power to raise people up. We have the power to relieve their suffering, just as he did. And then we'll be free, just as he is. The kingdom of God is like a seed. It's not something we can see with our eyes. It's here within us. All we have to do to make our way to the center of the mystery is to lay our thoughts aside over and over again. My dear brothers, don't be afraid. Peace be with you. I pray you see me as I am, but I will not stay quiet, and I will not be silenced. We are all seen and heard in every act of mercy. We are all hidden in God with every act of love. So we baptize one and all with water, light, and fire, so they will be born anew, awakened, and ready for the day to come. For the world will only change as we change. That's just what I hear Mary saying. It's all in the voice of Mary from the movie, but especially towards the end when the voice I heard, it said, when she, I'm going to try to give you a bit of the movie through these words, but without spoiling it, because it's a total surprise. I'm not even going to go into the resurrection, which is a total surprise. And it gets deeper every time you see it. It's unlike anything were ever taught. We were taught a story that was too small. Okay, the nuns that I had, they're beautiful women. Some of them were twisted, but most of them were, they're there for the right reasons. But the story they were given, they weren't mystics. A lot of times they were like 19-year-old novices, doing the best they could, thrown in their classroom. There were 60 of us in classes in those days. Most of us, we got nonology. We didn't even get good theology. We got nonology, and they were doing the best they could, but the story was small and manageable. It worked to about the fourth grade. I spent 20 years in the seventh and eighth grade. By that time, the story didn't match up even with reality. The God was too small. The whole thing was, too small. And so most of us, had to let it go. Many of us just had to let it go. Just didn't nourish us anymore. It didn't make sense. Well, the big picture is it doesn't make sense even if you have the biggest picture. It doesn't make sense. This is a mystery path that Jesus lays out. We're looking at this basic mystery of how do you go from the tragedy of Good Friday to the absolute transformation and joy of of Easter Sunday. How do you get from here to there? And we're all there. We're all there at any moment. There's tragedy. And how do you transform that? That's basically what we're working with in this community, because we all have the world as it is, and it's sort of tragic and it's sort of sad, and there's a lot of unnecessary suffering. Well, it was that way in Jesus's time. They were living in occupied territory, occupied by the Roman Empire, and think of Ukrainians now living in their country is starting to be occupied by, outside power again. Yeah, it's, you could call this occupied United States if you wanted, because we're an empire too. Well, let's break down a few of these things. The first thing that stands out, she said, the kingdom of God is like a single grain of mustard seed, which a woman took and sowed in her garden. Well, if you have a little context here, that's a radical statement. Right away, she's right with Jesus. Jesus, these are words of Jesus, of course, but she's gripping them. And the movie starts and ends with those words. Now, mustard was prohibited because it would take over. Right now, as Mary and I walked yesterday out in the field, all to the end of the road, the dandelion revolution has taken over. The dandelions are everywhere. But in a week or two, the mustard will take over the field. And that's the image of how something very small like this Jesus revolution, it started small, and it is small because it involves us cultivating another way of seeing that, a different garden here. But it was prohibited. Mustard was prohibited from being planted or dealt with. Certainly you wouldn't plant it in a garden because it would take over. So this is, a single grain of mustard seed, which a woman took and sowed in her garden. I mean, it's a totally revolutionary idea. It would have shocked people then. It even shock you now that the woman does the sowing. And it grew and it grew. And the birds of the air made nests in its branches. I've seen that out in the fallow field. I've seen the mustard growing up, and I've seen the birds in them. It's going to give us a home. It's going to give us a home, but it starts small, but you cannot stop it. The screensaver, I can get to that for a minute. We'll make that point. If you came in late, you might have missed it. The screensaver makes that point. This comes from a myth about Mary Magdalene. She was, all the women are all thrown together as whores, prostitutes, except for the Virgin Mary. So, what's your choice as a woman? You're going to be a virgin or a whore. This was not a really great interpretation, but it lasted, for a long time. In the Western Christianity, in Eastern Christianity, Mary Magdalene was never a whore. She was a saint from the get-go. So a lot of it had to do with the Roman Empire and women and whatnot. But she's pointing to the eggs she's holding. If you don't know this myth about Mary, I think it is a myth. It's a truth, but I don't think it actually happened. But the story was Mary's presence was so huge to their community that she actually got an audience with Caesar, and which is a fantastic idea, but there it is. And then Caesar comes out and she says, look, knock off trying to kill the followers of Jesus. You killed him and you couldn't kill him, and you can't kill this movement. It's going to take over. So you might as well give up trying to kill us. And supposedly there was, again, another fantastic element. There's a bowl of eggs, of hard-boiled eggs there. And Caesar generates, he looks at the bowl of eggs and he says, well, I'll believe a man can come back from the dead when those eggs turn red. And so Mary supposedly picked up the egg and it turned red. Miracle, of course, fantastic. But and that is the origin, by the way, of coloring Easter eggs. It started in Eastern Orthodox. In Russia, if they, and all the Eastern, if they color eggs at all, it's not with all this glitter and Walmart stuff in different colors. It's just red. Kind of comes from that image. She's in red, the thing's white there, but that's, you cannot stop this movement. yeah. That's a nice. It's a nice myth. It's a nice myth, and you can't stop this movement. It's going to spread. So then she says, the whole time we've been looking for a change in the world, but it's not what we thought. The kingdom is here now. It's not later. It's here now, and it's not what we thought. Which I like that. You know, we have this idea of what heaven would be like. That it's later. But it's no, it can't be what we thought. That's the problem. We were given all these thoughts about what it would be. Actually, as a young kid, I was like a little priest wannabe. That's what I thought it was going to be. But I had problems. I didn't quite trust this God. He was a little bit too much like my father, a little unpredictable, and you never know when he's going to blow his stack. And and then the thought of being in heaven for forever, eternity. Well, I just equated with being in church for eternity, and I said, "Well, Jesus, I don't know if I really want this." Uh, so it's not what we thought. That's the problem. When we threw out all of this big energy that Jesus had, and the Buddha had 500 years. I got the picture of the two of them. I'm still in dialogue with these two paths. It's my whole life. Well, they're not really two. They go to the same place. They're different, but they're not separate. But it's a nice dialogue that I've been living for 50 years. The Zen guys brought me back to take another look at Jesus, but not what we thought. It's not what you thought. And then she says, it's not something you can see with your eyes. It's here within us. And then she says, all you have to do is let go of our anguish, our resentment. You could keep going. Hatred, prejudice, racism. It's just, those are all stories that we bought. And then for the world will only change when we change. That's the refrain that goes through this, that she really ends up in that last scene trying to get it across through the rock, Peter's head, that it's a slower process. The world's not going to change until we change on an individual level. And then she says something very interesting about the kingdom of heaven. It grows. It's not static. It grows within us with every act of love and care and with our forgiveness. Jesus forgave everybody on the cross, supposedly. Well, that's a tall order. Forgave the people who set him up. He forgave the guys who nailed him down. He even forgave the two guys on either side of him. That's pretty huge. It grows within us with every act of love and care and our forgiveness. So it's not a static thing. And then she says towards the end, because again, she's talking to the men who are afraid up in the upper room at the very end of the movie, and at the end of her gospel too, the gospel that we have, the fragments that we have. And she said, my dear brothers, don't be afraid. Peace be with you. And that's a very interesting thing. When you see Jesus in the icons, he's like this. Okay, we have the peace sign like this, but that we're misunderstanding something there. Unless you could really go a little deeper with the peace sign, is that these two fingers seem separate, but they're all part of the one hand, you see. So maybe, but Jesus, in the icons, they do this. So the icon guys are trying to tell us that this is that not two-ness, this non-dual vision. He knew that there was no division between the male energy and the female energy. And I don't have time to go into it today, but then further we'll talk about how Jesus integrated, as a Jungian would say, to integrated the male and the female energy totally. He just happened to have a body of a man. Well, Mary did the same with the body of a woman. And when you see the strength that the woman has, you see the scene where she's face to face with a Roman centurion on a horse. And what happens in that scene, you see you'll see that she's integrated the strength and all the aspects of the male. Animus, as Jung said, and then but she has the animum, and so it doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. Our first job is to integrate our entire being to make the two one, because we have both of these very different energies, the male energy and the female energy. The Buddhists quote it this way: wisdom and compassion in an eternal embrace. Wisdom is the feminine energy, it's openness, it's listening, it's this open space, and then compassion is the action. So action and contemplation put together. That's what this really means. So she says, peace be with you. That's the first thing Jesus says when he, in his, well, it's a different kind of body. It's sort of the in-between body that is a body, but it can go through walls. When he shows up, the first thing he says is, and they're all freaked out. Of course, he says, peace be with you. Don't be afraid. And then she said, I pray you see me as I am. And they don't. The church is still not. The best bumper sticker I ever saw out at the monastery, it must have been some radical nun. And she said, the bumper sticker said, don't baptize us if you won't ordain us. She's not, as a woman who's speaking out, and she, Mary just refuses to be silenced, and she goes off, and she has her own community, and she had her own gospel. And it would be great if we could, nothing happens on Wednesday during Holy Week. Why not give a day? Why not just bring the women in, and like I said, stop baptizing them if we can't ordain them. We bring them out of secondhand, the back of the bus, which is where they sit, although they're the only ones in the pew. Well, there's more to this, but our time precludes that. But I think that's enough. And if you see this movie, it's gonna, if there's anything of the Jesus way that's life-giving for you, you might get it from this movie, especially if you threw that baby out with the bathwater a long time ago. So anyway, the whole thing is there for you tomorrow, and then the movie's there. It's as close as Netflix or Amazon if you want to buy the DVD. I really recommend it. Well, now as one of the parts of the gospel says, that it's we can access this if we're willing to let go, to lay aside our thoughts. And that's essentially this next phase. It's the center of our meeting every time. We have some lectio, some teaching, some words of wisdom, and then we sit. And you whatever practice you're comfortable with, you do that. But the pinnacle practice in both Buddhism and Christianity is a kind of laying aside of thoughts. Okay. Centering prayer is the revival of that, which sort of died out for about 400 or 500 years in the Western Christian line. Contemplation was looked down upon or thought a little bit suspect. You can't control a person who is sitting here letting go of the storylines. Yeah, and that's why it was not looked well upon, as the church grew. The Eastern Church had those practices more. Yeah, so, or from a Buddhist perspective, it's the same thing. It's the same thing in either Tibetan or Zen. You hit the same thing where you just sit. And when thoughts get in the way, lay them aside. So we'll have our time to do that now. So we're shifting into meditation mode, and John will end the tape.